This is Easter Island, home of the world-famous head statues, or Moai, and we're going to explore it for the next 72 hours. We go with many questions and no answers.
Easter Island is famous for its giant stone heads, but what lies beneath them is even more shocking.
Finally discovered the truth about Easter Island. Easter Island, also known as Rapa Nui, has always been pretty cool and a big mystery because of the giant rock statue.
For centuries, explorers and tourists believed the Moai were just monuments. Yet recent excavations are revealing hidden bodies, secret chambers, and traces of ancient rituals. Archaeologists are uncovering secrets that rewrite everything we thought we knew about this mysterious island. What they've found will leave you completely speechless. The discovery of the buried bodies. For years, most people thought the statues on Easter Island were just giant heads sticking out of the ground. Pictures showed huge stone faces staring toward the horizon, already mysterious enough. But the truth hiding beneath them was even stranger. The story starts with the early explorers and photographers who visited the island in the 1800s. They saw dozens of these massive heads poking out of the soil and assumed that's all there was to them. Nobody thought to dig deeper. After all, who would imagine that these heads actually had bodies buried underground? The first real hint came from British archaeologist Catherine Routledge, who led the Mana expedition in 1914. She conducted some of the earliest careful digs and recorded notes and photographs that suggested the Moai were more than just heads. Decades later, in the late 20th and early 21st centuries, Dr. Joanne van Tilburg returned to the island with a team of specialists. Using careful excavation methods, her team documented every layer of soil and examined the statues closely, uncovering details that had been hidden for centuries. It wasn't until archaeologists dug systematically that the full bodies were revealed. The statues weren't just heads at all. They had torsos, arms, and even carvings on their backs. Some of the buried bodies were almost 20 feet tall. Standing next to one, it would barely reach the waist. What looked like a simple head sticking out of the dirt was only a small part of something much larger. The soil had covered the rest of the statue over hundreds of years. So, how did they get buried? The answer isn't that they were purposely hidden. It happened naturally. Over time, rain and wind washed soil down from the slopes of the volcanoes, slowly covering the lower parts of the statues. Centuries of erosion did the rest. The island's climate and constant movement of earth created a natural blanket that buried the giants up to their necks. When archaeologists uncovered them, they noticed carvings and markings on the backs that no one had seen before. These included symbols, shapes, and patterns believed to represent the Rapa Nui people's link to their ancestors and gods. These details changed how experts viewed the statues. They weren't just works of art, but sacred, made to honor and connect with the spirits of the past. During one major excavation led by researchers from the Easter Island Statue Project, scientists worked carefully around the statues, documenting every layer of soil they removed. They found tools made of stone, rope fragments, and traces of the platforms where the statues once stood. It became clear that these weren't random carvings placed anywhere. Each statue was part of a planned and spiritual landscape. The discovery of the buried bodies also helped answer another big question: how the statues were made and moved. The exposed parts showed wear from transport, while the buried parts remained smooth. That meant the statues were likely moved upright and slowly lowered into their positions before being partly buried by nature over time. For the local Rapa Nui people, the statues, called Moai, were never meant to be buried. They were built to stand tall, watching over their villages and protecting them. Each one represented an important ancestor. So when the bodies disappeared under layers of soil, It was like losing sight of a family protector. The discovery changed how the world saw Easter Island. What once seemed simple turned out to be far more complex and deeply human. It showed how nature can change history and how much can be hidden right below our feet, waiting for someone to look a little closer. And just when everyone thought they had seen it all, another discovery made the story even stranger and a lot more interesting. Because beneath the same soil that hid the statues' bodies, archaeologists found something else. Something that revealed how deeply spiritual and organized this ancient society truly was. The hidden chambers beneath the Ahu. After learning that the famous statues had full bodies buried beneath the soil, researchers began to wonder what else might be hiding under the island's surface. Their search led them to another mystery: the stone platforms called Ahu. These were the flat, raised structures where many of the statues once stood. From a distance, they looked simple, but beneath them, something far more interesting was waiting to be found. At first, people thought the Ahu were just foundations made to support the massive statues. But when archaeologists started digging, they realized these platforms were more like layers of history stacked on top of each other. Each one had been built and rebuilt over generations. And hidden inside some of them were chambers that had been sealed for centuries. Inside these chambers, researchers found human bones, tools, and fragments of obsidian, a type of black volcanic glass that the Rapa Nui used for carving. It didn't take long to figure out what these places really were. They weren't storage rooms or simple construction gaps. They were tombs. The Ahu were burial sites built to honor chiefs, important figures, and ancestors. This discovery changed how the whole island was perceived or understood. The statues weren't just decorations standing on platforms, but were guardians, placed above the resting places of their people. Digging through the soil, archaeologists noticed how carefully everything was arranged. The bodies were often buried with items that seemed personal or sacred, such as beads, shells, and carvings made from bone. It showed that the Rapa Nui treated these burials with great care. Every stone, every layer of soil had meaning. In some sites, like Ahu Tahai and Ahu Nau Nau, scientists found that older chambers had been buried under newer ones. That meant the islanders didn't abandon old sites, but built on top of them, keeping the memory of the dead alive by adding new statues and platforms. It was their way of showing respect to the generations that came before them. When these discoveries were shared with the world, people were amazed at how much had been hidden in plain sight. What once looked like empty stone platforms turned out to be part of a massive system of sacred architecture. The Rapa Nui had been built not only upward, but also downward, turning the ground beneath their feet into a living monument. Some archaeologists believe that the chambers also served a spiritual purpose. They might have been used in ceremonies where priests or family members came to speak to their ancestors, asking for guidance or protection. Others think the chambers helped connect the living world with the spirit world, like a bridge between those who walked the earth and those who had passed on. Even more interesting is how these chambers were built. Without metal tools or machines, the Rapa Nui shaped volcanic rock by hand, fitting massive stones together so tightly that even after centuries, many of the structures still stand firm. It's proof of their skill and deep respect for their craft. But it makes one wonder. If the statues had bodies buried beneath them, and the Ahu hid chambers below, what else might still be sleeping under the soil of Easter Island, waiting to be found? The sacred red pigment pits. Not far from where the massive Moai statues stood, archaeologists discovered a series of strange pits filled with deep red soil. At first glance, it looked like ordinary dirt, but tests showed it was iron-rich, a natural pigment that the Rapa Nui people had carefully collected and stored long before Europeans ever set foot on the island. These were not random holes. The pits were worked, shaped, and used over and over, showing that this pigment was more than just color. Some pits were shallow, while others went deep into the ground. Signs of repeated use were clear. The soil had been stirred, dug, and carried away in small amounts. Scientists believe the red pigment played an important role in Rapa Nui life. It was used to decorate statues, tools, and even bodies during rituals. The color red symbolized life, power, and protection. When a moai was finished, the workers often brushed red pigment onto its surface. It was not a decoration for beauty alone. It was a sacred act meant to bring energy and a connection to the ancestors. Some experts also think the Rapa Nui people rubbed the pigment on their skin during ceremonies. This could have been a way to honor their gods or call on the strength of past generations. Others suggest it might have had practical benefits, like helping protect the skin from the sun. Whatever the reason, it was an essential part of their culture. As researchers studied the pits, they found more evidence of careful work. Tools, shells, and bits of charcoal were discovered nearby, suggesting that the pigment was processed on site. Some think the soil might have been ground, mixed with other materials, or even heated to make a richer color. In a few locations, there are traces of water channels, hinting that water could have been used to separate fine dust from rough clay. The level of care shows that the Rapa Nui treated this pigment like treasure, not just dirt. Traces of the red pigment are still visible on some Moai statues today. Scientists believe that certain areas of the statues, especially around the heads and shoulders, were covered with it. It's possible that many statues had red markings to make them look alive or sacred under the island's sun. Imagine hundreds of Moai standing silently, glowing with touches of red. The effect would have been amazing, a constant reminder of the spirits watching over the people. The discovery of this pigment made it obvious that the Rapa Nui were more than builders. They were artists, chemists, and a whole lot more. They knew their land and how to use it to create something meaningful. Sadly, much of this knowledge was lost over time. As the island's population declined and resources grew scarce, the pits were abandoned. For centuries, they lay untouched, silent witnesses to a culture that once thrived on creativity, belief, and precision. The coral eyes that brought the Moai to life. After the discovery of the red pigment pits, archaeologists began to notice something odd about the statues themselves. They had deep, empty sockets carved into their faces. Some thought those holes were just for balance or decoration, but something about them didn't sit right. One afternoon, while studying fallen statues near the coast, a researcher, Sergio Rapu, picked up a chunk of white coral lying in the dirt. It was smooth, shaped, and clearly not just another rock. When they held it up to a Moai's eye socket, it fit almost perfectly. That moment opened the door to one of the island's biggest secrets. The Moai, it turned out, once had eyes. Real, carefully made eyes. The whites were coral from the ocean, and the pupils were small stones, usually black or red. When those eyes were placed in the sockets, something changed. To the people of Rapa Nui, that was the moment the statue came alive. The islanders even had a name for it, opening the eyes. It wasn't just a phrase, but more of a ritual. When a Moai's eyes were added, it meant the spirit of an ancestor had entered the stone. From that point on, the statue wasn't only a carving, it was a protector, a presence watching over the living. You can almost imagine the scene. The community gathered, the statue standing tall, the coral being lifted into place as chants filled the air. When the eyes finally faced the land, Everyone would have felt it, like a sleeping giant now awake, guarding them. Each Moai faced inland, never toward the sea. They were always watching the villages, keeping an invisible line between the world of the dead and the world of the living. That's why the eyes mattered so much. Without them, the Moai were just stone. But with them, they were family. Finding the coral pieces also showed just how skilled the islanders were, because shaping coral is not easy. It's brittle and rough, but they managed to carve it perfectly round and polish it until it shone white under the sun. The pupils, made from volcanic rock, were fitted right at the center, giving the Moai an intense gaze that must have felt almost human. When early European explorers arrived in the 1700s, they never saw the statues with eyes. Most had already been toppled, with the eyes gone. Time, war, and fear had stripped them bare. For generations, people assumed they had always looked that way, blank, expressionless. But once the coral eyes were rediscovered, everything changed. It was as if the Moai finally had their story back. The first full eye ever found intact came from Ahu Nau Nau, a platform near the beach of Anakena. When researchers placed a replica into one of the statues, the giant face that once seemed calm suddenly looked alert. The eyes caught the light and reflected it back, and for a moment, you could almost believe it was watching you. Even now, real coral eyes are rare. Most remain buried or broken, but those that have been found tell us that the people of Rapa Nui saw life in everything they made. Yes, they carved stone, but they gave it a soul, and maybe that's why, even after centuries, the Moai still seem alive.
These are the Moai. They are an important part of Easter Island and the Rapa Nui people. They are the symbol of this island. There are thousands of them.
You can stand before them and feel their gaze, even if the eyes are long gone. It's as if the island itself remembers what they once were and what they were meant to protect. Ancient engineering secrets. How they moved the giants. One of the biggest mysteries of Easter Island is not just the statues themselves, but how the Rapa Nui people moved them. Some of these Moai weigh up to 80 tons. That is heavier than most small houses, and yet they moved them miles from the quarry where they were carved to their final resting places along the coast. How did they do it? Without wheels, horses, or modern machines? For centuries, people could only guess. Early visitors assumed ropes and logs were the answer. They imagined men dragging the statues flat across the ground. But experiments showed how difficult that would have been. Even with hundreds of workers, moving something so heavy on logs would take weeks, maybe months, and could easily break the statue. So, the real method had to be cleverer than anyone first thought. Modern experiments and research have revealed something amazing. Archaeologists Terry Hunt and Carl Lipo tested local techniques and found that the statues could actually walk. Using strong ropes, teams of people rocked the statues side to side, inching them forward with careful coordination. Watching this in action, it's easy to see how the Moai seemed to march across the island, almost alive. This theory matches some of the old legends, which talk about the statues moving on their own. Maybe the stories were based on real techniques that made it look magical. The quarry at Rongorongo gives more clues. Statues were carved directly out of volcanic tuff while still in the ground. Workers chiseled the back and sides first, leaving the front attached. Once the face and front were complete, the Moai could be carefully detached and moved. The precision of the carving shows the builders understood balance and weight. Every step of the move had to be planned, from tilting to stabilizing, or the statue could topple. Even the smallest details mattered. Some Moai were fitted with platforms at their bases, making them more stable during transport. Others were carved with holes for ropes to slide through. The entire process was a combination of physical strength, careful planning, and deep knowledge of physics. It's incredible to think about what this shows. The Rapa Nui were engineers, problem solvers, and innovators. They turned massive, immovable rocks into symbols that could travel across their island. Seeing a Moai walk today gives a new respect for their skill. The Rongorongo writing tablets. If you walk into the small museum on Easter Island today, tucked behind the glass displays are wooden tablets covered in strange, tiny carvings. At first glance, they look like scratches made by someone idly passing time. But look closer, and you'll see something almost hypnotic. Neat rows of symbols in the shape of birds, fish, plants, and little human figures sitting or holding objects. These aren't decorations, but words, or at least what the islanders believed were words. This is Rongorongo, one of the world's greatest unsolved mysteries. No one knows exactly when the people of Rapa Nui began carving these symbols. The earliest Europeans to arrive on the island in the 1700s didn't mention seeing any writing at all. Yet, by the mid-1800s, missionaries and explorers found dozens of these tablets scattered across homes and sacred places. Some islanders even said that before the missionaries came, the tablets were read aloud during ceremonies, and that only certain men, trained from childhood, could understand them. The carvings were made on pieces of wood, often from driftwood, that washed ashore. Each line was carefully etched with shark teeth or small stone tools. The symbols followed a special pattern called reverse boustrophedon, meaning you'd read one line from left to right, then turn the tablet upside down to read the next. It's an odd method, but it shows how much care and precision went into it. There are around 24 tablets left in the world today. Most of them were taken away during the 19th century, and they now sit in museums in London, Santiago, and St. Petersburg. The island itself has only a few remaining pieces. Sadly, when missionaries arrived, they told the islanders to abandon the tablets, calling them pagan. Many were burned, and with them, the last people who could read the carvings were lost. Over the years, experts from everywhere have tried to unlock Rongorongo's secrets. Some believe it might record the island's history or the names of chiefs and gods. Others think it could be a form of genealogy or ritual chants. There's even a theory that it might have been the only writing system ever created in the Pacific, which would make it a rare wonder of human creativity. But no one has ever cracked it. Not one symbol can be read with certainty. Without a Rosetta Stone, a translation to compare it to, the tablets remain unreadable. Each attempt to decode them ends in more questions. What do the little birds mean? Why are some figures holding staffs or sitting cross-legged? Are they telling stories or counting something important? Some locals believe the answer lies not in modern science, but in the island's own oral traditions. They say the tablets held the island's prayers, laws, and memories, guarded by priests who vanished long ago. It's possible that when the old religion was replaced by Christianity, the last of those who understood the writing took their knowledge to the grave. Still, the mystery is yet to die. Each visitor who stares at those carvings feels that pull to know what the ancestors were trying to say. Were they writing about the statues, the gods, or warnings for the future? The Birdman cult and the great cultural shift. When the days of carving the great stone heads were over, something else began to stir on Easter Island. The people were tired, hungry, and divided. Their crops were dying, and the old gods carved in stone no longer seemed to answer. Out of that silence, a new belief was born. It came not from the ground, but from the sky. This new faith centered on a strange idea that power no longer came from the ancestors in stone, but from a god of creation called Mekimek, whose spirit lived among the birds. His followers believed the birds carried messages from the gods, and that Whoever could claim the first egg of the season would become the chosen one for the year. That man would be called the Birdman. Every year, the islanders gathered on the high cliffs of Rongorongo, where the sea crashed far below. Across the water lay a small rocky island called Motunui. It was covered in birds that came to nest once a year. Each clan picked a champion to swim through the rough waves, climb those sharp rocks, and bring back the first egg. The task was dangerous. Some men were swept away by the current, while others never returned. But those who did brought back something far greater than an egg: power. The man who succeeded became the Tangata Manu, or Birdman. For 1 year, he ruled over the island. He was treated like a king and kept in isolation as a sacred figure. His victory brought pride to his clan and favor from the gods. It was not just a contest, but a way to prove strength, courage, and divine blessing. The village of Rongorongo became the heart of this belief. Its stone houses, built like boats, were covered with carvings of birdmen and human faces with long noses and wide eyes. These carvings still exist today, marking the place where the people gathered to witness this daring ritual. Each mark in the stone tells of men who risked their lives to lead their people. The Birdman cult changed everything about Rapa Nui society. The old ways of worshipping the Moai gave way to something more immediate and personal. Power was no longer passed through family lines or linked to stone statues. It was earned through bravery. This shift gave the people a new way to see leadership and faith in a time when survival was uncertain. By the time European ships reached the island, the Birdman ceremonies were still being held, though they were beginning to fade. Disease and colonization soon ended most of the rituals. Yet the story of the Birdman never disappeared. It became part of the island's memory, carved into the cliffs and talked about through generations. Easter Island's connection to other ancient civilizations. Easter Island is located in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and for years, people thought the Rapa Nui lived completely cut off from the rest of the world. But new evidence is changing that idea, and it looks like the island's people might have had connections with other civilizations far across the sea. One of the most surprising clues was gotten from plants. The sweet potato, which comes from South America, was growing on Easter Island long before Europeans arrived. How it got there is still a mystery. Some scientists think Polynesians might have sailed to South America, traded or brought seeds, and returned home. Some are of the opinion that the potatoes floated across the ocean. Either way, it shows the Rapa Nui were part of a bigger story of travel and exchange. DNA studies have also provided more hints. Some genetic links suggest that people from South America and the Pacific Islands may have met long before Europeans came. Certain tools and farming methods on Easter Island look a lot like ones used in Peru and Chile. Even the shapes of some ceremonial platforms and carvings remind experts of Tiwanaku and Inca designs. These similarities don't prove direct contact, but they are very curious. The Rapa Nui were also amazing sailors. Polynesians could cross thousands of miles using the stars, ocean currents, and the flight patterns of birds. It's possible they reached South America and brought ideas or goods back with them. There are even some similarities with their languages. There are a few shared words and phrases between the Rapa Nui and some South American languages. The connection isn't huge, but it hints that they may not have been totally alone. The DNA and population revelations. New genetic studies are changing everything we thought we knew about Easter Island. For a long time, many people believed the Rapa Nui society collapsed because they destroyed their environment. They thought the islanders cut down all the trees, ruined the soil, and ended up starving. But DNA evidence tells a different story, that the Rapa Nui were not a dying people. Before Europeans arrived, the population was stable, healthy, and thriving. Agriculture was strong, and they had enough food to support their communities. Researchers collected DNA from ancient remains and compared it with modern Rapa Nui people. The results show that the population was resilient. Families lived, grew, and passed knowledge down through generations. Far from collapsing because of poor choices or greed, the Rapa Nui adapted to the challenges of their island. They farmed carefully, raised animals, and built their monuments with precision. Their society was more complex than outsiders ever imagined. European contact was what brought the real tragedy. Diseases like smallpox, tuberculosis, and influenza wiped out large portions of the population. Slave raids also took hundreds of islanders away. This is what truly caused the population decline, not environmental collapse. DNA studies help clarify that the Rapa Nui were not helpless. They survived and adapted until outside forces disrupted their way of life. The modern archaeological revolution. Archaeology on Easter Island has entered a whole new era. Modern tools are helping researchers see what was once invisible beneath the soil. Ground-penetrating radar can scan the Earth without digging, revealing hidden structures and buried statues. Drones fly above the island, capturing aerial views that show patterns in roads, platforms, and settlements. Satellite imaging gives a big picture look at the entire surrounding and uncovering connections that were impossible to notice from the ground. 3D scanning has also been very instrumental. Every moai, platform, and carving can now be digitally preserved in perfect detail. This means researchers can study fragile sites without touching them, and virtual models allow experts around the world to examine them too. Lost statues, hidden walls, and ancient roads are slowly coming back into view. The Easter Island Statue Project has been at the center of many of these discoveries, combining old excavation methods with new technology to rewrite the island's story. What these modern tools have managed to reveal is astonishing. Buried moai, platforms that once seemed isolated, and entire ceremonial complexes appear in ways no one expected. Some sites show traces of human activity that were completely hidden, from tool marks to traces of pigments. Every scan and layer of soil uncovered digitally tells us that the Rapa Nui were more organized and connected than previously imagined. Their society was not a series of scattered monuments, but was a carefully planned, functioning community. Digital archaeology is also helping in protecting the island's treasures. With so many visitors and natural erosion threatening the Moai, having exact digital records ensures the history will survive even if the physical statues are damaged. Researchers can share findings instantly, collaborate globally, and test theories without harming the real sites. Even with all this progress, the island still hides secrets beneath its soil. Every scan and survey seems to reveal something new, something that challenges what we thought we understood. And the more we uncover, the more questions arise. Could there still be entire villages buried beneath the earth, waiting to be discovered? Hidden moai lying in silence, holding secrets that could completely change what we know about how this mysterious civilization once lived? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. If you enjoyed this video, click on the next video on your screen.